I'm reading this book called Dying for a Paycheck by Professor Pfeffer. He teaches at Stanford Business School. He wrote this book in 2018, so this is pre-pandemic. But he talks about this idea that while more and more companies are obsessed with talking about mental health interventions as a productivity boost, it's sort of like you invest in mental health, people become distressed because of companies' productivity obsession. So you invest in mental health so that the employees can be productive. It's like a snake eating its own tail. Because there is a compulsion that companies' leadership has, they have to present a case to their management, etc. And productivity is a useful tool to justify these expenses on employee well-being.
You're saying don't look at productivity as your policy building initiative.
Absolutely, it is the number one biggest mistake that companies make. Because the message that you're then conveying to your workforce is, look, I have an employee wellness plan. So if you have an employee wellness plan, what you should be measuring is the impact on the employee's life, not on the company's productivity.
Absolutely.
So there's a huge disconnect, right? And once you see this, you can't unsee it. It's so obvious that you're doing this to ostensibly help your employees, but then why are you measuring your company's productivity or bottom line or whatever, right? Productivity benefits will definitely follow if you have a happy, healthy workforce, right? So in this Dying for a Paycheck, Professor Pfeffer, he says, he gives the example of several CEOs who had this sort of epiphany that, hey, these are real people. They are somebody's child, somebody's father, somebody's mother, somebody's friend. And as an employer, my first obligation should be to not harm them in any way. So this is part of the Hippocratic oath that doctors take. First, do no harm. It's the first principle that they're taught, and I feel like every leader should take that oath. First, do no harm. How can you minimize harm? And again, when you start thinking about it from that lens, you don't necessarily worry about whether a person, are you going to then create a safe workplace only for a person who has depression or a diagnosed mental health condition? So eliminating harm. There are very concrete ways in which companies, support their employees' well-being. For instance, I remember an insurance company, Aetna, several years ago, the CEO had a skiing accident and was badly hurt. For many years afterwards, he had a problem with raising his hand even. He was dealing with, his son had a rare form of cancer. So they were going through, the family was going through massive emotional churn. And once again, he had this epiphany that I run this company. These are real humans that work for me. And what the company did was to raise the minimum wage such that almost to $16 an hour, and almost a third of the company's workforce was impacted by this wage revision. And we know there is science that proves that low wages directly contribute to depression, to diabetes, all sorts of health complications, right? So this is not a mental health intervention. This is not about having a therapist on call. This is a direct social intervention, So when you start thinking of mental health as a biopsychosocial construct, what can you control as the employer? Can you control the person's biology? You can't change the person's biology, but sure, you can support their physical health and well-being. And I don't want to get into all the ways in which companies do that. There are many different ways, starting from ergonomic furniture to all sorts of things, to yoga and everything. Psychological interventions. How do you make the workplace less tense, less stressful, and then social interventions, pay people's salaries predictably on time, every time, have fair pay revisions. These are underrated interventions. But if you do a survey, I'm pretty sure people will say this is, top of the list.
Yeah. There's a growing trend of organizations now paying the salaries on the first day of the month instead of the last day of the month, which is in advance.
Right.
I think it's also sort of a great way to trust.
Build trust, absolutely.
Build the trust to the employees. Imagine you have joined the workforce today, you've joined an organization, and the day of joining you get a salary.
Yeah, absolutely. Phenomenal.